Hey everyone, and welcome back to StefanTests. We're checking out the Core i7-860 today, but first, a quick history lesson. 2008 brought us Intel's first generation of Core i-series CPUs. The Nehalem architecture debuted with the Bloomfield era of i7-900 processors on socket 1366. Bloomfield later becoming Linfield, and now on socket 1156, moved the PCIe controller onto the CPU itself. It also introduced the DMI, or Direct Media Interface, with the PCH, or Platform Control Hub, taking over any remaining Northbridge functions, which was now no longer needed. Bringing it back to the 860 then, this was technically the lowest end Linfield-based i7, launching at $284, around 420 today. It came packing 774 million transistors on the same 45nm node, a healthy 8 megs of L3 cache, and it was still a quad-core hyper-threaded chip. And it wasn't shy on clock speed either, with a fairly respectable for the time 2.8 GHz base clock. Single-threaded tasks would boost to 3.46, but you could expect all-core workloads to sit at just over 2.9. And as it was still Nehalem, we still have DDR3 support too. So for the video today, we'll be doing the usual and running the 860 through a small suite of benchmarks, both with and without an overclock. We'll also have a look at power draw as well. Speaking of overclocking though, off camera I managed to get this particular 860 to 4 GHz at 1.36 volts. So that's the clock speed we'll be using for the overclock test today. Otherwise, the specs for the benchmark system are on screen now if you want to pause and have a look at them. But let's get into our first game. So CS2 is first up today, and surprisingly had a fair amount of trouble running. It completely replaced CSGO in late 2023, although as of the time of writing, it is still available on Steam as a beta option. Performance was pretty terrible at 1080p with the lowest settings, with really noticeable stuttering throughout the three maps I tested: Dust 2, Mirage and Ancient. Frame rates would often drop to the high teens to low 20s around teammates and enemies, and we did manage to average nearly 50 FPS, but the 1% and 0.1% lows really struggled at 15.1 and 7.7 FPS respectively. We see that in the stuttering, which could be bad enough at times that it made it hard to even aim. I was quite sure during testing actually that there was something wrong here. Maybe a setting in the BIOS somewhere that was really screwing up performance, because the overclock completely transformed the game, way beyond what I'd reasonably expect, even from an OC as big as this. Average FPS more than doubled to 107.2, with the percentile figures at least doubling as well. Almost all of the stuttering and hitches were gone, except Ancient, where teammates and enemies close by could still trigger dips into the high 20s. So I'm sure there had to be some setting in the BIOS that was crippling performance before. I actually had the same issue at first with the overclock, but it magically fixed itself and I had no idea why. The 860 had almost no problems at all in GTA 5 though, even managing to average just over 59 FPS at 1080p with the high settings and FXAA to sort out the worst of the jagged edges. The only problem, and it was barely an issue at that, was occasionally you could see very minor micro-stuttering. And it wasn't so much stuttering, more the frame times could just be a little bit inconsistent at times. The percentile figures stayed over 30 FPS at 38.9 for 1% and 33.9 for the 0.1% lows respectively. Overclocking actually completely eliminates that minor micro-stuttering anyway, giving us a completely smooth 70 plus FPS experience. Generally though, at stock clocks, GTA 5 runs great and stays above 50 FPS throughout, even in the Sandy Shores area of the map, which tends to be a bit more performance intensive. So I had to give The Witcher 3 a try on the 860 as well. It originally launched in the same year GTA 5 did, but not long ago had its next gen update, which is the version we're running here. Back in 2015, the original version was always known for how well optimised it was, and despite the update, that hasn't really changed, as long as you temper your expectations on graphic settings a bit. 1080p with the medium preset in TAAU didn't really seem much of a problem for the 860, which managed to average 74 FPS, with 1% and 0.1% lows that, like GTA 5, stay over 30 at 44.3 and 34.3 FPS respectively. It could dip to the high 40s in village areas, where we'd also see some minor micro-stuttering, but otherwise it ran really well, maintaining over 60 FPS throughout. And also much like GTA 5, the overclock completely eliminates that stuttering in the villages. Performance was already reasonably good as it was, so visually you don't really see much of a difference, but it did improve the benchmark figures dramatically, averaging just below 100 FPS now, with a 61 FPS 1% low and 46.5 for our 0.1%. And lastly, as I've gotten really interested in Minecraft over the past couple of years, I had to include it here as well. It has gotten harder to run since its original release in 2011, but even today it's still really well optimised, and there's a number of mods available to boost performance even further as well. 1080p with the fancy preset, which is basically the maximum settings, runs really well here, averaging 123 FPS. There could be some minor micro-stuttering at times, and minor hitches when chunks are loading in, which we can see from the 44.5 and 25 FPS percentile figures. Frame times could also momentarily dip into the 60s underwater as well, but elsewhere we usually see well over 100 FPS. The overclock couldn't really make much of a visible difference to the game, as it was already performing reasonably well. There was a slight reduction in stuttering and hitches, and frame rates were now generally in the high 100s, often going well over 200 FPS, but on a 60Hz monitor, the overclock effectively makes no visible difference. The one thing it does make a noticeable difference in though, and it's something unique to Minecraft, at least amongst the games I'm testing today, is how long it actually takes to generate the world in the first place. The world you've been seeing here is just a standard creative type world with StefanTests as a seed, including the uppercase S and T if you want to benchmark your own system against this one. But at stock clocks, averaged over 3 separate runs, the 860 takes 41.4 seconds to generate the world, or only 29.4 seconds with the OC, from the moment you hit create world to the moment you first spawn in. And that is a reduction of 28% in time taken. Just over 10 seconds reduction might not seem much, but extrapolate that to worlds that turn out to be bigger and more complex, and that gap will just get bigger. So overall, the i7-860 is still doing reasonably well, 15 years on from when it first launched. I'm still certain there was something wrong with CS2 though, either something with my test setup or maybe the game itself. But yeah, the 860 even today is still offering fairly respectable performance considering its age. One other thing to think about though is the power draw. I capture power draw using a physical clamp meter during the Cinebench R20 runs, so I can get a worst case idea of what the power draw is going to be like under full load. And power draw more than doubles to 145 watts with an OC compared to a much more reasonable 67 watts at stock. The overclock pushes the i7 way beyond the peak point for efficiency in the volt frequency curve, so power draw goes through the roof. It's still easy enough to cool though. I only paid £24 for the cooler I used by a brand called Up Here. That's only about $30 US. But yeah, that's going to be all for today. So if you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe to the channel, especially if you would like to see more content like this. I'll also put links to my Twitter, Ko-fi and Patreon pages in the description down below if you'd like to support me in creating this content. But that's it for now, so hopefully you enjoyed my look at the i7-860 today, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.